Hi, Mr. Milburn. I'm Michael Palmer. This is my presentation. For this presentation, I've just made up a scenario whereby I might be a solicitor and I've got a client who's come in and they've told me that they were involved in a home invasion. They sustained a concussion due to a blow to the head, and they're wondering whether, because they've been missing out on work and they can't sleep and so on, they're wondering whether they're eligible for any kind of compensation. So I'm going to do some research with this client and see whether they are in fact eligible for compensation. I seem to think that they might actually be a victim of crime, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to do some research. I'm going to share my screen with you to begin with. And we're going to have a look at, we're going to start with a broad search, a general search, and what better search engine to do this with than Google. So I'm just going to put in Victims of Crime Australia and see what kind of hits we get. I'll hide myself there as well so that you can see the screen. Having a look down, we've got a few hits: victims of crime.wa, that seems specific to wa.vic. Victims of crime compensation. Well, that could be something that I'm interested in, compensation. We'll see if this leads anywhere. So I shall follow the link. And what we've got is victims of crime, compensation and counselling. And it says victims of crime in Victoria, okay, they receive government-funded financial compensation and counselling to assist with recovery. And it goes on to give me some figures there. So it would seem that if you are in fact a victim of crime, then you might be eligible for some kind of compensation. Okay, so I'm going to continue a broad, general kind of search to see whether I can develop the information that I'm building upon now. I'm going to use a more law-specific research tool, which I can get from my library law databases, and I'm going to go to LexisNexis AU, which I've already got open here somewhere. So LexisNexis AU, of course, features a law encyclopedia, also a law dictionary. And to save time, I've actually gone to the law dictionary, and I've just done a general search, victims of crime, and this is one of the hits that I got. Criminal injuries compensation. So from this broad general point, I'm going to try and somehow build the pool of information that I can draw on, but I'm also going to try and then narrow in on something more specific and relevant to me. So just having a skim down, I've actually been directed to a piece of legislature relevant to New South Wales, which is where I am, which says the Victim Support and Rehabilitation Act 1996. So I've got a bit of a lead there on a piece of legislature that I might like to explore. But before I do that, I'm going to continue this broad research phase and see if I can get a more in-depth analysis of the type of issues that I'm dealing with. So just below that ID is a tab which leads me to a law journal called CCH. Of course, you're aware of that. And I'm just, as you can see, I've done a basic search. Up here you can see the search victims of crime to see if I can find a journal which can give me some more overall information. So having a skim down, I've got here scheme of compensation. The others didn't seem to apply very well, but I'm going to click on result number 13, scheme of compensation, and see whether it's of any interest to my situation. So having a skim down yet again, I've got criminal injury compensation victims. Okay, Compensation Act 1996, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia. Criminal injury compensation, New South Wales. Okay, it's governed by the Victims Compensation Act 1996. Claims may be entertained in relation to an act of violence. Okay, so there's another piece of legislation that I might be interested to have a look into, which is called the Victims Compensation Act 1996. Okay, so this is given me this has given me a real lead. So I'm going to actually follow up on these leads, and I'm going to go back to our law databases, and I'm going to go to Austlii, which will take me to legislature and case law, which I'll be able to access. Okay, so what I'm interested in, having a look down the left, is actually specific to New South Wales, so I can filter it as far as that is concerned. And then having a look down, I've got the case law, and I've also got legislation there. Now I'm going to have a look at the New South Wales Consolidated Acts to see if I can find the legislature that's been suggested I have a look at. I'm going to look at V for victims, and scrolling down, I've actually been able to locate the piece of legislature, Victims' Rights Support Act 2013. So this is good that I found this on Austlii, but of course Austlii is not an authorised source of information, so I do need to bear that in mind. Having a look down here, meaning a victim of crime, this is actually relevant to my situation because I want to know whether in fact my client is eligible for compensation. I need to know whether he is a victim of crime. So following the links, I can now look at number 5, meaning a victim of crime, and see that in fact he does fall into this category because he suffered harm as a direct result of an act apparently committed by another person in the course of criminal offence. So that's great. I found the piece of legislature in Austlii, but now I want to go to a more authoritative source and make sure that I'm looking at relevant and current information. So I've gone to New South Wales government legislation, where all the legislature held here comes from an authorised source. Now, I want to find that piece of legislature, so I'm just going to browse generally. It's an act starting with V. It's the Victims' Right and Support Act. There it is, 2013, number 37. So I've found it there. And what I can see now when it loads is some information about the Act, and more specifically status information. Currency of the version, it's current from the 15th of January 2016, the provisions in force, and then I've got the responsible minister, authorisation, all these kinds of things. So now when I want to use that piece of legislature to further the research, I can use this the statute from this website, and I know that I'll be looking at current relevant legislature. Okay, so now that I've done this, I want to actually place this piece of legislature in context a little bit better. So I want to find a second reading speech to do with that legislature. So I'm going to go to Parliament of New South Wales website, where I can find such a second reading speech, and I'm going to have a look at bills, all bills, and I'm going to search V. And having a scroll down now, I'm going to get down to victims. And what I can see here is Victims' Right Amendment Bill, Victim Rights and Support Bill 2013. Then I've got the Victim Support and Rehabilitation Amendment Bill 2006. So that's a little bit older. However, the Victim Support and Rehabilitation Amendment Bill was cited by the dictionary, but the 2013 version is more current, obviously, and was also the one that I found on the government website and also in Austlii. So I'm going to bring up that piece of legislature and have a look at it. What I can see here is that it was an act to establish a new victim support scheme to replace the compensation scheme established under the Victim Support. So that's the relationship between the Victim Support and Rehabilitation Act 1996. This was a scheme to replace that. But if you continue on, it says in brackets with minor modifications, so there might still be points of law in the old Act which apply to the new Act. So that was good. Now, if I do want to go down and read, I've got the second reading speech by the Minister, also by the Council's Minister there, which I can go and read if I do choose to. So now that I've found a piece of legislature which I think applies to me, I want to see if I can further my research and have a look at some case law that might be able to assist me in working out where I stand with my client. So I'm going to go back to the law databases and use Ostley again. And I want to find a case which actually may have used that legislature in the decisions of the case. I'm going to use LawSite to do this. Now, I'm unaware of any of the parties involved, so I'm just going to put in the legislation that was considered. Now, the new legislation was the Victims' Rights and Support Act. And I'm just going to do a search on, actually I'll put in the year as well, which is specific to that piece of legislature. Search on that. Okay, I don't have anything found there. Victims' rights, maybe if I spell it correctly, because the spelling is absolutely necessary to get right. Victims' Rights and Support Act 2013. Okay. Now, I know that the old legislature was a slightly different title, and because 2013 is very recent, I might get a different result if I put in victim support. Oh. Okay, that act wants to come up straight away. And if I do a search on that one, I've actually got quite a few cases which take me to that piece of legislature. Now, this case, Victim Support Fund and Brown, is actually a decision made in the High Court of Australia. If I scroll down, it's telling me that it's relating to that piece of legislature, which I know is the same as the new one with minor alteration. Finally, with the facility called NoteUp, I can click on NoteUp and that will take me to all the different cases that refer specifically to that piece of legislature. So that's all I have time for. Actually, I'll stop the share. Okay, there I am. That's all I have time for. Thank you very much for listening, Mr. Milburn, and thanks for a great course. I hope to see you shortly. See you later.